Welcome to Ray-ality TV. I'm Raymond Bakari. This episode is continuing my coverage of the special election for Rhode Island's 1st Congressional District, where I interview all the candidates running for this seat. Joining me today is Republican Terri Flynn, who is a former Middletown Town Councilor serving 2 terms in that position. Terri, how are you today?
I'm terrific, Ray. Thank you so much. And thanks for doing this incredible public service for the voters. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful effort.
It's a pleasure to have you on. My first question, why do you want to represent Rhode Island in Congress?
It's 12 o'clock.
My apologies. I want to, first, I'd like to thank, before we get started, all of the people that actually helped me get to this point. I actually do have a campaign team, and I wouldn't be here or have the opportunity without a couple dozen or so people who helped get and submit the signatures to secure my name on the ballot, whether it was 1 or 2 signatures on a page or an entire page or pages. I have to say, thank you to them all very sincerely, and to remind them that we are all in this together still. And I've also tapped into the smartest and most well-read people who know me. They know who they are. And without naming names, I just want to put out a quick shout out to my advisor, economist, utility specialist, business owner, healthcare professional, contractor, veterans, photographer, and Rhode Island politics junkie. So thank you for all your continued support. Wow. Thanks, Ray. I know that was a little bit on the sideway. Why am I running for Congress? Well, all of those grassroots volunteers collected all those signatures, and I actually personally know about 90% of them. Yes, well, why would they do that? Well, I have been an elected official, and I do it a little bit differently. The phrase I stand by from my town council campaigns is a leader who listens. A goal is to help people be heard, encourage public participation, not to make decisions for the public, but to make decisions with their voice. My campaigns for town council were totally grassroots. The campaign for Congress will be totally grassroots. And congressional delegates are supposed to spend a lot of time with voters in their district. And I look forward to that. I'm very boots on the ground, and I enjoy talking to people. And I listen. When I'm elected, I participate. I don't just get the title and sit in the seat. I research the issues. I ask questions to make sure I understand them. I make sure the issue is transparent to the public and they understand it too. My decisions are data-driven. With a win-win goal and a long-term sustainability element. I believe the volunteers and those who signed all those signature sheets know this, and they want me to bring that to the federal level. A little known fact, I have to throw this in, is that Middletown Town Council is a nonpartisan council. So council's candidates party is not identified on the ballot. And so my campaigns, collecting signatures, but also nonpartisan. And because my experience is nonpartisan based, I'm really not entrenched in the political party system. It really will enable me to truly collaborate with other members of Congress for solutions to the issues that are really causing people to struggle right now. I'll work with across the aisle on all the issues that the constituents of Congressional District 1 tell me to. I'm really hoping to include some common sense bipartisan solutions to Social Security and the economy and the cost of living. And I just have to say that the power for change is in the hands of the voters. Voters realize they're bombarded with special interest messages from many sources during a campaign season. Ground mail, email, text, radio, TV, yard signs, palm cards. And that's what the big money war chests buy. And I am not an attorney. I am not beholden to a party necessarily. I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm asking voters to take a look at the candidate, not the party label. Maybe this is the right time for them to do that.
And you are currently running in the GOP primary for this seat alongside retired Marine Colonel Gary Leonard. What differentiates you from your opponent heading into this primary?
Well, I think I kind of just covered that. I think that I do have some elected official experience. And I think that my philosophies are a little bit different from standard, political arenas. I am very firm on bringing the voice of the people up to the federal level. Elections have gotten twisted, in my opinion, Ray. You are elected to represent the people that voted for you, but candidates, they present to the voter their agendas, their positions, and the voter is supposed to find the one that fits them the best, which, on issues today is very difficult. So, and that's not really representing the voter. So my position is going to be to get boots on the ground, to talk to the people in the communities of Congressional District 1 and find out where the majority stand on these issues, and then to go and be their voice at the federal level.
It may be just a tad bit of an uphill battle because the party has put their support and endorsement behind Gary Leonard, but you're also going to be on that ballot, so there's always a possible chance. Did you reach out to the party leadership to try to get an endorsement or tell them that you're running?
No. When I submitted my declaration of candidacy papers, I did it because I have that grassroots group that like how I do business as an elected official. And when I was on the Middletown Town Council in my elections, I was voted in 2018 with the second highest vote count, and in 2020 with the highest vote count. That does, I think, represent a little bit of something right there. I've also served a couple of years on the planning board. I was on 9 different committees while I was on town council. So I do have some background there. Now, my designation has always been Republican, and I wasn't going to change for this election for really 4 reasons. As I said, my experience is nonpartisan based. Second, the party labels are becoming blurred and increasingly meaningless because law allows them to be misused as tools to strategize elections. Third, in my opinion, most best decisions on an issue kind of swing somewhere in the middle for that win-win positioning. And fourth, again, because of all those reasons, maybe it's time that voters start looking at the candidate and not at the party label. I'm a citizen candidate. Like I said, I'm not a CEO. I don't have, a war chest, and I'm not beholden to other elected officials. And, I'm sure that the state committee followed their bylaws when choosing which candidate to endorse.
Just to pin it down, so at this point, even after that endorsement, you haven't had any conversations with party leadership?
I have not.
Okay, moving on to some policy positions. As you're knocking on doors and as you continue to knock on doors, you're definitely going to hear about the economy. I like to ask congressional candidates about the national debt because it's $32 trillion and counting, and it's not only going to affect my generation, but the next few. How would you contribute to addressing that issue as a congressperson?
Yeah, the economy is broad, national debt, and there's so many, I think, supplemental issues or partner issues: cost of living, illegal immigration, minimum wage, housing, healthcare, veterans. The national debt's actually pretty straightforward of all of them. According to the federal revenue and spending figures, the U.S. total revenues for 2022 were $4.9 trillion, and total spending was $6.3 trillion. That's about a $1.4 trillion in the negative. And that's just not sustainable. It's not sustainable in our households, and it's not sustainable for the country. Efforts for a bipartisan solution to the national debt should be a priority, because debt, whether in your home or your community, can only be addressed by either increasing revenue or reducing expenses.
Are there any specific solutions you want to list that you have in mind when you head to Congress to address the issue?
Since you ask, I think that one of the issues I think that is top on everyone's mind is the U.S. tax code. There should be a total overhaul of the U.S. tax code. Something that would benefit taxpayers nationwide, not just Rhode Island or Congressional District 1. And everyone's got ideas, but there's a collection of conversations that I'll put on the table as an out-of-the-box proposal, since you asked. It might be worth addressing the tax issue with something like instituting a flat tax that would be weighted at the extreme ends, And instead of hiring more IRS agents, this proposal would eliminate or severely reduce the IRS. Don't fire them and add them to the unemployment rolls, but use the agents, use their auditing skills, audit the government departments, identify efficiencies and redundancies to create more revenue, right? It's either cut expenses or create more revenue. And this would be obviously an effort in cutting costs. And to this end, I think I would recommend, if this were to be discussed, that creating a dedicated fund, maybe an enterprise fund, to track the revenue generated and use those surpluses to either pay down the national debt or to pay into Social Security.
Speaking of Social Security, I'm glad you brought that up. I had a follow-up about that. And since we're talking about cutting expenses, a lot of folks in the Republican Party are kind of cozying to either privatizing Social Security and Medicare or just outright, cutting it. Some folks, like, say, for example, Rick Scott, Senator of Florida, he said it's going to have to be looked at. Former Vice President Mike Pence, even Speaker McCarthy has talked about it. I think this sounds like you'd probably differ from that mainstream point of view on it. How would you differ from those Republicans on these programs?
Well, Social Security must be saved. It's got to be overhauled without risk to the seniors. I know right now, and hence, the solution that I threw on the table, it takes nearly 3 taxpayers right now to fill one Social Security recipient's coffer. We got to generate more revenue, find more funding sources, make sure that system is secured for generations to come. If you've paid in, you should get the full amount out. And this is time critical. The saying that applies here is that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I will work across the aisle to ensure that Social Security is not taken away or devalued.
And before we move on from the economy, one of the subjects you touched upon in an earlier answer, the cost of living, even though Democrats like to argue that inflation has gone down, which, it has compared to last year, but the prices still haven't gone down. There's 2 philosophies on what's still causing those prices to be high. Democrats say it's price gouging. Republicans say it's the lingering effects of that federal COVID spending from 2021. What do you think has caused these prices to not go down?
Well, inflation has weakened the U.S. dollar, so its buying power has diminished. The U.S. government spending has caused significant inflation and resulted in the highest interest rates in 22 years. As a result, people are struggling. The cost of living goes up when spending goes up and interest rates are high. We need policies to bring down the cost of living. That should be focused on. And it should include energy independence, which will also bring down the cost of living. So,
moving on from the economy, another top issue that is probably not so present in the Republican primary, but if you get past that primary, will definitely be present in the general, is the issue of reproductive rights. Do you consider yourself pro-life or pro-choice?
So this issue is no longer a federal one, and this is a federal seat. As you know, Roe v. Wade was overturned on the grounds of the 10th Amendment and states' rights. I make decisions that are data-driven, so I'm looking at the facts. In Rhode Island, Rhode Island voted in 21 to codify abortions if Roe v. Wade was overturned, and it was. The General Assembly in Rhode Island voted to use public funds from Medicaid to pay for abortions. So if it ever did go, to the federal level again, because right now it's not there. So really, this is not, a conversation unless in the future it got back to the federal level, because Congress is a federal seat. I think that the point to start discussing would be, when should the government intervene in parental rights and responsibilities? Because the question when it comes up for me, because it's noteworthy that right now we have a Department of Children, Youth, and Families. It's a government department. They intervene when children are at risk. They intervene with parents. It's also noteworthy to look at even strictly pro-life states that include abortions and publicly fund them when rape and incest and health and well-being of the mother are involved. So these are the conversations, government intervention, parents' rights and responsibilities. At what point is it appropriate? And that's something that I would, again, I would want to reflect what the constituents in Congressional District 1 feel. It's not really up to me.
Well, I do want to pin down your stance on this though, because you're definitely
Okay.
going to get asked about this at the doors. There's without no doubt that this is going to be brought up at the doors. So personally, yourself, do you consider yourself pro-life or pro-choice?
So, and again, and I'm not being cagey on your question, but again, this is where, again, elections have twisted, and it's time for those who are elected to really, really represent the voter and what they feel. So I will absolutely be putting my boots on the ground, talking to those in the communities of Congressional District 1 and get a consensus so that I can be their voice up at the federal level.
So you personally don't have a stance on the issue?
I really don't. If I'm elected to be Congressional District 1's voice.
I do want to ask a follow-up on this, because if you are elected, you're likely going to get pressure from your Republican colleagues who say want a 15-week abortion ban. How would you vote on a measure like that if elected to Congress?
Well, it's not going to come up to Congress. You're saying like if it would, right? Because
Well,
it's state.
I understand that. I understand that's
Okay.
pushed to the states, but federal legislation could still be introduced. For example,
It could be.
Senator Lindsey Graham wants the 15-week abortion ban. The other senator of South Carolina, Tim Scott, has floated it. Even former Vice President Mike Pence. And on the Democratic side, they float passing of federal legislation to codify Roe. So there's still federal action that could be done on it.
Understood. And again, I'm assuming that they are acting on behalf of their constituents. And honestly, Ray, I would do the same thing. I will find out from the 18-19 communities where the people stand, and I will vote the way that they want me to.
So if folks in the district say, Congresswoman Flynn, can you pass bill, or can you vote to repeal the Hyde Amendment, you would go along that way?
Yes, if that's what the voters wanted me to do. That's why I plan to be in the communities and find out what they want, because that is what you're elected for, to represent those people.
Got it.
In my opinion.
So just so I have it clarified before I move on to, I have a couple lightning round questions. So no
Okay.
personal stance, but you want to do everything to make sure that you have your finger on the pulse of the community.
That's right.
Got it. Okay. So I have a couple quick lightning round questions to get through some quicker topics. I'm looking for shorter form answers. Banning members of Congress from trading stocks. Do you support or oppose that idea?
How short do I need to be? It's a yes or no for me. I have to tell you, it's hard enough to get people to run for office. So to take away an economic freedom, I think that there's laws for violations that exist. Initiatives for transparency and limits could be instituted. One thing I will say that members of Congress can do is they can trade stocks in a blind trust. And as they may be privy to information the average citizen would not have access to in making stock decisions, I'd support bipartisan legislation to end corruption in Congress and ensure that Congress has to follow the same rules as everybody else.
So you would oppose banning them from trading stocks, if I have that correct?
I would oppose it with the caveat that there has to be some initiatives for limiting or making it more transparent, and making sure that they can't do that blind trust trading.
So no ban, but transparency.
With transparency, limits, and no blind trusts.
Got it. Do you support or oppose a national ban on assault-style weapons such as the AR-15?
Again, this one comes down to data and what the law says. The Bill of Rights makes it illegal to take firearms from law-abiding citizens. It's enshrined in the Constitution.
So you'd oppose a ban?
Well, again, I would certainly survey the constituents of Congressional District 1, but I'm going to tell them what the law says.
But personally, this legislation is likely going to come up if you're elected to Congress, how would you vote on that? Would you support banning them or oppose it?
Again, I will be speaking to the residents of the communities of Congressional District 1, and I will inform them. That's my role, inform them and get their consensus and bring it back to Federal Hill. But there are laws that right now protect the right to self-defense and, having firearms for law-abiding citizens. Now, there is approaches for increasing safety and firearm ownership. And some of them are non-regulatory that work, community nonviolence programs, gun buyback programs, and increased mental health support. I think that's, it's a topic that you need to look at really where the root of the issue is.
I do understand that, and I understand, I respect the approach of wanting to hear all the folks in the district to adequately represent them, but somebody's going to watch this and say, where does she stand on this? So you don't have a personal stance?
Again, as an elected official, this is what makes me, that citizen candidate, somebody different. I think that it's twisted around to where everyone has their own agenda. I am trying, very hard not to do that. When I went into my town council meeting, same thing. I didn't want my mind made up until I heard from the public input at the meeting. And so that would be more important or equally important as whatever was in the docket I got the week before, because that is really what our job is.
This one's another favor of or opposed to question. The idea of legalizing cannabis on the federal level. Are you in favor of or opposed to that idea?
Yeah, this is something that is probably so unlikely to happen until the next generation or the next generation are in leadership positions. I doubt it's even going to come up. And it's unlikely until a test mechanism has been developed to measure impairment as a result of marijuana use. Again, this is what I will be sure to ask the citizens in Congressional.
Well, okay, I'm going to stop you there because Rhode Island passed it, and the citizens voted for those folks to be in the General Assembly to pass it. And there was a lot of pressure on them these past couple election cycles.
Yeah.
So does that give kind of an answer to then give you the idea of how you would vote on it?
And it might. I would certainly want to look at the statistics that came in from the vote in those communities and see where they were leaning and, make sure that if it came to the federal level, because again, these are not black and white issues. It's easy to ask a very blatant question, but these bills, when the legislature gets to people, there's 40 pages and there's all sort of, strings attached and other things going on. So it's very, very difficult to say blatantly, yes, I would support this. And so it's a matter of looking at the data, looking at the details, the devil's in the details, and making sure that, again, the public in Congressional District 1, that they understand and that they make that decision, and I go and represent them.
This one might not require the input of the Rhode Islanders. What is one committee that you would like to be on if elected to Congress? This one has to have a decisive answer.
And actually, it kind of is, because I actually did scroll through all those committees, and they all do 19 or 20 things. And I think that the one that would do the most for Congressional District 1 is the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee.
Moving away from lightning round, these next two are kind of more like political questions. So this is one question that Republicans either have faced or definitely going to face, especially as you knock on Republican voters' doors. There's a 2024 Republican presidential primary going on. There's, I think over like 13 candidates running at this point. Out of all those candidates currently running, who would you see yourself supporting in a Rhode Island presidential primary?
Yeah, I am just going to be the bane of your existence today, Ray. First of all, I am not just going to knock on GOP doors. I'm not doing it. I'm not recognizing the label. My message to voters is to please vote for the best person for the job. The labels are becoming blurred and
but it's a partisan primary that you're going to have to do that. Well,
we shall see. The message is to vote differently if you want change in politics, correct? So first of all, you asked what GOP candidate that I would support. Well, I'm looking at GOP and Democratic because I'm going to vote for the best person for the job.
Who would it be?
Regardless of party. And my answer to your question is that it's really way too early to tell who I would support.
Okay, so currently undecided. This one is kind of in a similar ballpark because, despite party labels in the party that you're currently registered for, which is the Republican Party, there's this ongoing factionalization between the pro-Trump crowd and the crowd that just wants somebody new, whether it's Governor DeSantis, Nikki Haley, or just somebody that's not President Trump. Where do you lean in that regard?
So ask the question again because you started mentioning a lot of the players and
no worries. So there's this ongoing factionalization within the Republican Party between the pro-Trump crowd and the crowd that just wants somebody different. Where would you lean in that regard?
Oh, well, I am all for, having someone different. I think that, when I ran for town council for 2 terms, and I chose not to run in 2022 because I wanted there to be a vacant seat for someone else to have a chance to represent the people. And I think that having new people adds energy and different perspectives and new voices to the decision-making conversations. So I think it's important to have someone different. And I practice what I preach there.
Speaking of you not seeking re-election in 2022, you actually had mentioned that in a letter to the editor on Newport this week. And you, in that same letter to the editor, I'm assuming it's similar reasons. You said you supported term limits. How many would you support?
How many for what office?
Oh, sorry, for Congress.
Okay, for Congress. I think they're 2-year terms, and I think that the Senate gets 6-year terms. It's 12 years. So I would, I think, support the same for them. For I would go 6 terms to make up 12. And I just want to say that voters may not know this, but the power for term limits is in their hands. Term limits are never going to happen if voters don't vote differently. Here's my message. Voters need to vote for those candidates that are in favor of term limits. Obviously, I am. And then the voters need to vote those candidates in the majority so that majority can then pass term limits. So I just wanted to lay that out for our voters as they look to the future elections. And if that's something that the voters want, that's how they do it.
I do want to ask this follow-up. I didn't have it in mind, but since I know that you favor the term limits, typically when I ask this to folks who are not in favor of it, they give one of 2 answers. It empowers lobbyists, or we have them already, they're called elections. You'll likely hear that pushback from some of the opponents on that, those who are against that issue. So what would your response be to those concerns?
Well, I think to the elections concern, I think that the party labels, it's all intertwined, have allowed voters to vote out of habit and to vote with a surface look at who is running. And so, and I think that allows candidates to be elected when there may be better options out there. So I think that allowing term limits would, again, as I said, fresh voices, and you cannot argue, for those people, you cannot argue that when someone, it happens in businesses, when someone has a position for an extended time, they get complacent. You cannot tell me that someone who is in their 20th year representing the people is as ambitious and energetic and on top of things as their first 3 years. You can't. And I think that, again, also the affiliations, yes, it's great to have business, relationships, but for fairness in making public decisions, I think that sometimes those relationships, and I don't think anyone would argue with me, can actually get to the point where they're efficient and effective up to a point, and then they become deterrents. So I think that there's a lot more deeper arguments for term limits than against term limits. And I think that most people that aren't sitting in those seats that they've had for a long time would agree that term limits are probably something that should be taken a look at.
My final question is on the non-political end. I asked this at the end to keep tradition. I've been asking everybody on the show for the final question. In your opinion, what do you think Rhode Island is best known for?
Well, hands down, Rhode Island is best known for being the smallest state, at least probably nation and worldwide. So being the smallest, but being the greatest state, we offer so much. And I have to say, being the smallest state, I think down the line that, Rhode Island is a perfect, and this is in a positive light, a perfect petri dish. Its small size lends itself to so many hypotheses in economics and education and housing, almost anything. We really should start marketing that and get paid for being small.
I agree with you on that. That's definitely one of our core strengths because everything is close to each other. Everybody knows each other. It's impossible to not, get from one side to the other. I think the rule is 15 minutes is too long, which is very convenient because if you go to Texas, you drive from say one town to another, it could take like probably upwards to an hour or something like that. That's I think a good place to end things. That was my final question. Terri, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Likewise, Ray. Thank you so much, and enjoy the week.
Thank you, and you as well. And thank you for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV. If you want to see future episodes as soon as they're posted on this channel, please click the subscribe button down below and the post notification bell icon to the right of it. I'm Raymond Bakari. I'll see you next time.